drinking water shows results that are above the EPA's nearly undetectable new 2022 advisory levels. That's where we talk about the 1 part per trillion. According to the EPA, PFAS are a group of synthetic chemicals used in a wide range of consumer products and industrial applications, including nonstick cookware, water-repellent clothing, stain-resistant fabrics, carpets, cosmetics, firefighting foams, electroplating, and products that resist grease, water, and oil. PFAS are found in water, air, fish, soil, animals, and humans at locations across the U.S. and the world. The development of these compounds started in 1940 and are not ambiguous today. In January, MAWSS was required by the Alabama Department of Environmental Management to sample for PFAS compounds in the finished drinking water in the first and second quarters of 2022, and to alert the department if the combined result was greater than 70 parts per trillion. The detected range of PFAS and PFOA was 1 to 2.2 parts per trillion. On ADM's website is a list of water utilities and their measured PFAS levels. MAWSS had some of the lowest levels of these compounds in the state. Select drinking water sample report after the following link to see a list of statewide utility results, and that link is provided in the document. The EPA, without prior warning, released interim health advisories of 0.004 parts per trillion for Pfoa and 0.02 parts per trillion for PFAS on June 15th. These new health advisories are based on new data and draft analysis. Water systems with PFOA and PFAS detections were advised by ADM to notify customers accordingly. Again, advised. We chose that route. MAWSS provides our customers is the same water provided before these new interim health advisory standards were released. In the fall of 2022, the EPA is anticipated to release preliminary primary drinking water standards so water utilities can know how to modify treatment processes if necessary to remain compliant. Starting in 2023, the EPA is requiring all water systems serving over 3,300 people to participate in the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, which is the UCMR program, which includes testing for 29 different PFAS compounds. We will continue to modify our processes as necessary to meet the regulatory requirements of ADM and the EPA. Please see the EPA New Health Advisory Fact Sheet attached, and we send the link there. You know, we're trying to get out before this as best we can. I understand the message that was sent, which was a EPA message, alarmed some folks. But I can assure you standing here today that our water meets all the safest regulatory compliance requirements that are set forth before us. Again, attached in that CCR report shows that. So at this time, I'm going to make an introduction. Today we have Monica Allen, who's our Public Affairs Manager. I have Ms. Susie Lindblom, who is our Regulatory Compliance Officer here with MAWSS. And I have Doug Cody, who is the Director of Plant Operations. So Doug's going to dig into a few more details concerning the PFAS, PFOA. So I'm going to introduce Doug. Doug?
Thank you, Bud. I appreciate you all coming out to listen to us talk about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information. Some of it's going to be a little bit redundant with what Bud just read, but some of it may not be. So I'm going to go through this to help you understand what this is and why this has become a concern. These polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS as you might see it, or also some may call it PFAS as a short way of saying it, are manufactured chemical compounds that are used to resist water, oil, stains, and they also resist high temperatures. There are thousands and thousands of chemical compounds that fall under the category of PFAS. And it's not known at this point if all of the compounds have been identified that fall under PFAS. So PFAS began use in the 1940s, so that's how far back it goes in our country. And they're called forever compounds because since they're water resistant, oil resistant, stain resistant and high temperature resistant, they don't degrade very easily. They take many, many years to degrade in the environment, and that's why they're referred to as forever compounds. Now, Bud gave you a list of things that use these compounds. I would imagine that if we had a comprehensive list of all the products that use these compounds, it would take us pages and pages and pages of documentation. So fabric, we know is one. We've all heard of waterproof fabrics. We've all heard of sprays that you can put on your boots and shoes that make them waterproof. Leather, carpet, stain-resistant carpet. And we all seen that, Stain Master and so forth. Stain-resistant carpets can contain this chemical. This is a big one, food packaging. Okay, when we say food packaging, we're talking about much of the packaging that is used in the fast food industry for wrapping hamburgers, pizza, fries, whatever, to deliver those products to the customer. So packaging is a real big issue. And paper coating, which is, as I just mentioned, the paper that food is wrapped in from restaurants and things of that nature. So it's out there. And nonstick cooking surfaces. You know, a number of years ago, PFAS came up in regard to using cooking surfaces and changing that chemical to different compounds for nonstick cooking utensils. Electrical wire insulation, cosmetics. I think I read somewhere that 50% of cosmetics at one time contained PFAS. Sunscreens, shampoo, shaving cream, firefighting foam, used to protect food processing equipment from heat. So in food processors where there's a lot of heat and so forth, this compound can come in contact with food, and again, it's ingested. And then there are many other products. So PFAS is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. And it's in our products we use daily. It's throughout the environment, in animals and in humans. It would be difficult to escape it. The two PFAS chemicals of primary concern to EPA as it relates to MAWSS public advisory are PFOA, which is perfluorooctanoic acid, and PFOS, which is perfluorooctane sulfonate. The EPA has put out information that identifies human studies have found links between PFOA and PFAS exposure and effects on the human immune system, cardiovascular system, human development, and cancer. Now, interestingly, the EPA identified that the basis of issuing this interim health advisory for PFOA and PFOS is the very low levels of these contaminants that are suspected of being able to suppress vaccine response in children and adults. As far as cancer goes, there are no water regulations in regard to PFAS effects on cancer. However, there are studies that are ongoing, and one day there will be such regulations. So why does the EPA issue these health advisories? Well, it's for obvious reasons. Number one, they want customers, utilities, and the water industry to know that through their studies, they have discovered these items of concern. And because, as Bud mentioned, of the new science, the new technologies, the mathematical capabilities to model a lot of these things, they come up with these particular concentrations, if you will, of concern. So first and foremost, the reason for the EPA putting it out is to get it before the public. And one might ask, well, why in the world is MAWSS receiving so much attention? Well, MAWSS, when they discovered this, when this new health advisory came out, MAWSS chose to send out to the public the data that we had on PFAS in our system. And because we did that, we sent it out to every customer, and we knew that when we did that, we were going to get a lot of interest, which is fine. That's what we want. We want people to understand what we're doing, what's out there, and how to work with it and live with it. And So we've received many calls and so forth from folks, and that is because we put out the notification. Had we not done that, you wouldn't have known about it, and we probably wouldn't be standing here today. But we'd rather be transparent about these kinds of things. We're transparent about SSOs, other things in our environment and in our community, and we want the public to know. So PFAS will be in the news for many years and at different levels of interest depending on where they're focusing, because, like I said, it's everywhere. These compounds are commonly found heavily at military sites because of the firefighting foams and things of that nature that are used on military installations. So EPA wants this information in the public so that individuals can educate themselves on the matter. There's much information on the internet, especially on the EPA's website, about PFAS. We invite individuals to go to those sites, people to go to those sites, educate themselves, and to make health decisions regarding that. EPA has not advised us or directed us or in any way asked us to tell people to stop drinking the water. This is an early advisory based on some draft information that is telling us in the community that there will be some regulations coming in the primary or secondary drinking water standards that are going to require us to treat PFAS to whatever levels they deem necessary in their regulations. Okay? Other things that EPA wants the public to know, if you feel like you want to filter your water at home, that's something you should do as an individual. Does everybody need to do it? No. If you have some special health circumstances that you may want to ask your doctor, is this an issue for you, then certainly you want to do that. Not recommending that people go to bottled water. Why? Because bottled water is regulated by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. It is not regulated by the EPA. There are no PFAS regulations on bottled water. Now, there are some bottled waters out there that are better than others by the way they're processed before they're put in the bottle. For example, some bottled waters may use reverse osmosis as a treatment process before it's bottled. That would reduce PFAS. So if you're considering bottled water, then do your research on the different brands, because they're not all the same in regard to how they're processed and bottled. And then, of course, talk to personal physicians if you have questions about your health. Also, the EPA puts this information out so that utilities and the water industry as a whole can begin to contemplate where to start moving the industry in regard to this information from the EPA. Because a lot of it has to do with not only the technology of measuring these contaminants, but the technology of removing these contaminants from the water. On June 15th, as Bud said, health advisory limits for PFOA and PFOS went from 70 parts per trillion each and combined to PFOA of 0.004 parts per trillion, and for PFAS, 0.02 parts per trillion. Now, I do want to say something about these levels of concentrations. These levels of concentrations are so low and so small that today's analytical procedures cannot either detect them nor measure it. So this is a concentration that was most likely generated from calculations that were created by numerical models, with EPA taking data from many different sources, putting them into the model, and then getting some result that produced these low concentrations. So as you can imagine, as an industry, it was a bit of a surprise to us when these levels came out at so low a level that they can't be measured. So how do you know whether you're meeting the level or not if you can't measure it? So that's one of the confusing aspects of it, and it's something that we have to learn and we have to engage with our regulators more about, to understand how are we going from this health advisory to the regulatory standards that tells us how we must treat our water and what standards we must meet in our water. Bud showed you the consumer confidence report. You'll see in that report primary drinking water standards and secondary drinking water standards. Those are standards established by the EPA and ADEM that we have to comply with when we drink water and put it out to our customers. What this is all about is that PFAS is one day going to end up in that CCR. It's going to have a limit that we have to treat to, and it's going to have reporting requirements so that the public continues to know where we are with PFAS in our drinking water, and that we either are or are not compliant with the regulations. So understand there is no regulation right now. This is just an early advisory of what EPA is learning and where they're headed in regard to this particular chemical compound. So as Bud mentioned, for PFOA, MAWSS was at 1.8 to 2.2 parts per trillion. PFAS, MAWSS was at 1 to 1.6 parts per trillion. As Bud mentioned, ADEM has on their website a listing of utilities that have measured PFAS, and those utilities have their concentrations identified, and I don't think there's any of them on there that show concentrations down in the areas that are identified on the EPA's advisory. Now what you might see is some utilities aren't on there. That's because when they did their sampling and they did their analyses, they got a no detect. In other words, their particular concentration was lower than their analysis could detect or measure. So it doesn't mean they don't have PFAS, it just means it's below their level of detection. Okay, does that make sense? So moving on, of course, like I said, water utilities and the industry as a whole was surprised to see concentrations this low. It really puts all water utilities at some risk of PFAS contamination because they may have non-detects, but like I said, they may still have it in their water. It's just at low levels. So what is MAWSS' path forward? First of all, we need to continue to communicate to the public about upcoming developments regarding PFAS. So this is the start of something, not the end of something. And so our obligation to the public is to continue to inform you about PFAS in the drinking water and what we are doing to address it for our customers. Secondly, we have to continue to monitor ADEM and the EPA regarding the development of PFAS regulations. So as a utility, you can understand that when regulations are forthcoming, we are going to change our processes as necessary to meet the regulations, okay? But if we don't know what the regulations are, we don't know what target we're shooting for. Now, some of these solutions may cost tens of millions of dollars. I mentioned reverse osmosis. There may be granular activated carbon. There may be ion exchange, which is the use of polymers to settle out PFAS. Those are really the three primary technologies for addressing it at the treatment plant. But before we go spending a whole lot of money going in one direction and then maybe find out that's not the direction we needed to go in, we need more information to make wise decisions because it's too much money to go in the wrong direction. So what we're going to do is keep the public updated as we get information from the EPA and ADEM about the direction we're headed in, what we're hearing from the regulatory agencies, and how we're going to address this issue over the long term. That's really all I had to say. It's going to be something that's ever changing. If you look in the CCR and you go to the primary drinking water standards and you see all of the chemical compounds that are there, well, they went through this same process some years ago. It was discovered there were a problem. They put in place regulations to get it out of the water. We changed to meet those regulations, and they're no longer an issue for us. And the same thing is going to happen with PFAS. So with that, I'll open it to any questions you might have on the matter.
Is MAWSS going to try to access funding that the infrastructure bill sets out billions of dollars set aside to invest in?
Yes, we try to pursue any funding we can get, grants or matching funds or otherwise, in order to improve the utility, whether it's on the wastewater side or the water side. We have to learn about what all of the requirements are for those. We understand that many of those grants are for smaller utilities, and for disadvantaged communities. So we don't know exactly what those constraints are, but we'll learn of that. Our need for that is going to be dependent on what these regulations identify, so we know how much money are we talking about to correct this problem. But yes, we will pursue it.
Has MAWSS identified a source where the PFAS is getting into Big Creek Lake, or is it just so ubiquitous that it's just ever present, or is there?
You know, we don't have a particular point source. We think it's a non-point source issue. When we say it's ubiquitous, it can be in the air, it can be in dust particles in the air, it can be in the soil, it can be in the groundwater, it can be in surface water, tributaries that come to Big Creek Lake. So there's any number of avenues that it can come into the lake. We don't have a point source identified at this particular time.
You guys keep saying you guys were caught off guard with the EPA putting this out there on June 15th. Obviously, their concern with the science is the American public. And
Correct.
you guys are like, you guys wanted notice that they were going to do something like this. They're concerned, though, with the American public and now your customer, the customers that you guys
Correct.
serve.
Correct.
Is that not, I mean, shouldn't you guys be glad that they put this out there and be able to keep?
No, we're glad they put it out. You know, it's the purpose of the EPA is to protect the public and the environment, and we want to use science and technology to further our understanding of these contaminants and compounds in the environment, so we know how to address them for the benefit of humanity. And so when these things come forward, we're like, okay, well, this is something we need to deal with. Let's let the public know and then go forward. And that's what we've done.
And in the notice you guys sent out to all of your guys' customers in the mail, it said that you guys would continue to keep them updated. And the update time frame was next July. Are you guys not planning to do things more intermittently?
No, we'll do things more intermittently. It depends on what ADEM and the EPA put out to us. We don't know how fast they're going with the development of the regulations. For example, draft regulations are expected to be out in the fall of 2022. When they come out, there will be a public comment period, and we will let the public know when that comment period is out there so that the public can go to the EPA, give their comments about what they think about the new regulations. The EPA will take those comments from all over the country, review them, and then make some decisions about what the final regulations are. Regulations have to take into account the technology and the availability of technology to actually meet the regulation. For them to put a regulation out there that nobody can meet is kind of senseless. So those are things that we'll look for, and as we begin to learn more about what those expectations will be, we will begin looking at what are the options to meet those expectations, and we'll either have to dial up or dial back once we know the final regulation.
What about people that are concerned with drinking water? I know you said that you're not safe enough to drink the water, but people are going to do their own research, like you said. What about filters for them, and is there going to be any sort of compensation on bills or anything like that to install some sort of osmosis, reverse osmosis?
Not currently. We haven't contemplated that. Again, we haven't been asked by regulators. We're not being told that this is not that this is water you shouldn't drink. We're not being told that at all. We're saying that you should make your own decisions about that. You may want to wait. You know, I think one of the recommendations we get is wait until you see what these regulations are. Because this is not a concluded science. This is a preliminary interim public advisory, and as they continue to review their data and make their decisions, they'll come to a conclusion, and this will say, this is our conclusion, these are the regulations that we're proposing and requiring to protect the public, these are the regulations you must meet to protect the public. We don't have that yet, so that's what we're looking for. And so, you know, whenever you get a news advisory like this or a health advisory, yeah, the public should be concerned. They should read it. They should learn. That's why it's out there. They should ask questions. And we're obligated to answer those questions the best we can and with the information that we have. Right now, that information is somewhat limited. We don't know everything that went into the EPA's calculations. We don't know what all they contemplated. All we know is what they put on their website and tell us to present to the public.
Do you have any advice for filters or anything like that? Because I've looked up, the reverse osmosis and certification about the product.
Yeah, let me see if I can give you something here that might help you with that.
while Doug is looking for that exhibit, our regulatory compliance officer is going to come up because we are almost out of time, and John Sharp sent in some questions, so we want to make sure we get to some of that.
I'm going to give this. This is called the EPA researchers investigate the effectiveness of point of use, point of entry systems to remove per and polyfluoroalkyl substances from drinking water. They tested a handful of different drinking water filters, and they report in here on that testing. I'm going to ask Monica, if she would, to post this on our website so you can go to it. If you go to the EPA website and you search PFAS, you're going to find a whole host of articles on different things regarding PFAS, everything that I've discussed here today, plus other things that I haven't discussed. But they do have some information about the...
But please understand that this is the EPA's recommendations. We don't make those recommendations.
You can also Google it on the internet. There are listings on the internet of different bottled water, not bottled water, but filtration systems. And so what you're looking for is filtration systems that remove PFAS, PFAS, and you'll get a whole host of information. And I recommend to the consumers, consumer beware. I'm not saying that everything is 100% accurate as advertised, but do your research and find out, what the various companies are saying about the specifications of their products and what they remove.
So somebody asked the question, why were we surprised? Why were we caught off guard? Because as of January 2022, when we received the letter from ADEM that we needed to do this testing, we were told by ADEM to contact them if we had any results over 70 parts per trillion. So when we got our results, and the highest one was 2.2 parts per trillion, also nanograms per liter, we didn't think anything else about it. So we didn't think we had a problem until June 15th when the EPA released these new health advisories. And the first thing I said is nobody can meet these. And when I spoke with ADEM, their advice was if you have any detect whatsoever, then obviously you are above the EPA's health advisories. So that's why.
Is the instrumentation that you guys use to measure the samples, is it just more advanced than other utilities? And how confident are you in the numbers that are reported if it's so difficult to detect?
We send our samples out because it is a rather complex piece of instrumentation. So we send them out to an outside company.
I had talked to the director.
John, did you get your questions answered? Because we're getting ready to wrap it up now. He's had a chance. You're good? We can take one more.
The nanograms per liter is the same as parts per trillion.
Correct.
That wasn't an error, it's the same.
Correct.
measurement. Okay.
That
Yes,
is
ma'am.
correct. And if you'd like me to show you mathematically what
Okay.
it is, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
We verified that.
Okay.
Yes.
I just got one closing statement, and we're going to, end the conference. One thing I just want to make sure everybody understands. This is the guideline we operate under. These are the guidelines that are put before us right now that we assure our customers that we provide them with a quality water source every day. This is what we live by. As Doug stated, when the EPA comes out with regulations that say PFAS has to meet X, Y, Z, then we will put this in this document, and that becomes a guideline for us to move forward. We're not sure what that's going to be right now, and they don't know. They're still doing their studies to find out what the data should be. But this is a very important document, and I ask that y'all kind of look through this because this is the guideline of how we operate. Appreciate everybody.
To clarify about this, can you clarify really quickly? So the PFAS is not in this range?
It is not.
correct?
It is not. It is not. No, it is not. EPA is still gathering the data to determine what the limits are going to be, and when they put the limits in there, then it becomes part of our regulatory compliance moving forward, and that's what we're going to move forward testing. So
Because it's not in there, it's not right.
that's exactly right. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank y'all for your time.
Do you pronounce PFAS, PFAS, or PFAS?
You know, I've seen it as PFOS and PFAS in the document, PFOS, PFOS,
They're different, but
yeah,
PFAS.
PFAS is the umbrella that.
that it falls under, PFAS, yes. Thank y'all.